This is TWiT.
The U.S. is now. I have to say, I drove a Tesla. When I drove a Tesla and a Model X, I used full self. Well, they didn't have full self-driving yet, but I used the driver assist stuff. Occasionally, it would drift off, start to drive into a median strip or something. But I was never like in the back seat knitting. I was always with my hands on the wheel looking, and I just would gently nudge it back into between the lines and so forth. Tesla has been promoting the idea that it has full self-driving, and there have been 4 crashes. So the U.S. NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation and Safety Administration, NHTSA, has on Friday opened an investigation into all 2.4 million Teslas equipped with FSD after those reported collisions, including a fatal crash last year. My car, I have a BMW that drives itself, and same thing. I pay attention. I don't, I pay, and I keep my hands near the wheel. You don't have to have it on the wheel.
But that's level 2.
It's level 2. Yeah. Now the problem is more a marketing, in my opinion, a marketing problem that Elon's promising more than it can do. And there are some foolish Tesla drivers who are trusting it more than you're supposed to, right? I mean, Look, in the time there have been those 4 accidents, there have probably been 40,000 accidents with human-driven vehicles, maybe 400,000. I don't know.
I guess the point is that this isn't just about disciplining Tesla or taking care of the drivers who are foolish enough to believe Tesla. It's also about the harms to bystanders, right? Like, because these are not single driver involved collisions. These are things where other people are harmed or even killed, and they're harmed or killed because the world is full of people who have a variety of degrees of credulity, especially when it comes to the pronouncements of this very famous charismatic billionaire who's had lots and lots of press about being the smartest man in the world, and Disney made him Iron Man and all the rest of it. And then he goes around, he goes on stage and he says, this is full self-driving. Your car will drive itself from Los Angeles to New York, and you won't even have to put your hands on the wheel once, and it'll charge itself and blah, blah, blah. And someone goes, well, Elon Musk said it's so, and that person's dumb, and maybe that person has some culpability, but it's not that person who suffers. It's the person they run over and kill that suffers. And so that's why we have rules, and we have a National Highway Traffic Safety Bureau.
It also would impact his plans for a cyber cab, because he'd have to get NHTSA approval to do that.
Yeah, it's nowhere close. The cyber cab and robotaxi, is nowhere close, right? 2027, I know they're saying. And full disclosure, I own a Tesla. I have since 2021 a Tesla.
And you don't let it drive itself. You pay attention.
Oh my God. No, I would never, right? Like put my hands off it. But I do remember when autopilot, right, came out.
Yeah. You spent a lot of money for it too, didn't you?
Well,
I did.
Yeah, no, I didn't. But when autopilot, that was what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Autopilot.
And people were doing that. They were taking a nap and driving
in the back seat.
For all the reasons that Cory said. One of the things where I think that this is really been a failure of, a government failure, them calling it autopilot and not being sued for that, calling it full self-driving. Now they call it supervised full self-driving, but being able to get away with that and not as false advertising, it is the absolute definition of false advertising.
I agree. FTC should go after him.
No, it has to be DOT.
Has to be DOT.
They don't have jurisdiction.
Yeah. So the fact that they've been able to get away with that leads to what Cory is talking about, which is that then people believe that. They say if it's out there and you can buy it and it must be true.
When you were a kid, I remember when I was a kid, I guess I was maybe one of those credulous people you're talking about, Cory. I remember we used to say, well, if it's on a commercial, it has to be true. They can't lie. Was that ever true that they couldn't lie?
I mean, it remains broadly true. It's not as well regulated as it used to be. Some of that was down to there being a kind of special zone in relation to the First Amendment that had to do with the public airwaves. Right. So a lot of people.
So since it's not broadcast for the most part anymore, you don't have the same control over it.
You sometimes get people saying, "Oh, we should restore the fairness doctrine." And there are lots of problems with that. I mean, the fairness doctrine wasn't as rose-colored as they think it was. But also, it only applied to terrestrial broadcast.
Right.
Right. By all means, apply the fairness doctrine for all the good it's going to get you. It's not going to reach any of the people you're worried about. And First Amendment isn't going to let
Fox News is not on broadcast, nor is MSNBC. I mean, they are,
but that's not how most people are getting them.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's you're not going to be able to get the fairness doctrine on private wires because it's
private.
There isn't the same compelling
First Amendment.
Yeah.
I hope I'm going to hide some things so that hopefully this doesn't bounce back on them. But I have a very close friend, and they are a chief scientist at let's call it a biotech company, but let's PhD level. And they told me recently this past week that, oh yeah, I drive with hands off all the time, full self-driving. I said, all the time? And they said, yeah, every day going to and from work. And I was like, okay. I thought you were a smart.
My BMW does not require me to put my hands on the wheel. In fact, they have a feature where this seems dangerous. It says, it's faster in the other lane. If you just check your mirrors, we'll move over there. And if you look at your mirrors, it goes and zips over. But it's got a camera looking at my eyes, and if I pick my nose or drink a drink, it says, you're not paying attention. It really alerts me. And there are times when the road becomes confusing to it that it beeps loudly and flashes a red light saying, grab the wheel. So on the highway, it won't do it on a local road, and I think your friends will, and that's part of the problem.
The highway makes way more sense.
Yeah.
But the way it was described to me is they seemed to be fully convinced that this was 100%. And I was thinking in my head, I might do this for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but
on a highway.
On a highway as an experiment, but I wouldn't be doing it every day.
Part of the problem is if you're not paying attention fully, there is a second or two that it takes you to kind of grok what's going on and respond. And so that second or two can kill you because you're not fully paying attention to what's going on. Or someone. Well, you're right. In fact, so NHTSA opened this investigation because it seems that these crashes happened where full self-driving was engaged during reduced roadway visibility. I'm reading from a Reuters story, like sun glare, fog, or airborne dust. And a pedestrian was killed in Arizona in November of last year, after being struck by a 2021 Tesla Model Y. So you're right. That pedestrian did not sign off on FSD, did not agree to be a beta tester for Elon's driving skills.
I don't want to be enrolled in a self-regulated full self-driving experiment held by an auto company, right? Like I opt out of that. Thank you. Right.
Yeah. And that's one reason doing it only on the highway is probably a good idea because if you're a pedestrian on the freeway, you got other problems.
I mean, but it can also cause a wreck involving another vehicle.
That's true.
It's a separate set of problems. In automation theory, there's this idea of centaurs and reverse centaurs. So a centaur is someone who has to do something and part of the hard work is being done by the computer. So, you're the human body on top of the horse's body. But a reverse centaur is the other way around. It's when like the robot uses you to do some tasks that it can't do. So like, that would be like you having full self-driving in your car, and your car does some of the stuff that humans aren't good at in terms of being attentive, like the thing where it shouts at you when you take your hands off the wheel or whatever. Or
if you're about to run into something and so forth.
I've got a much less fancy car, but it tells me if there's something in my blind spot when I turn on my signals.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And
that's great.
Me too. I've forgotten to do a blind spot check more than once in my life. I love having that feature. But if you're an Amazon driver, your eyeballs are being monitored while you drive. And it's like docking your pay if it doesn't like the way you use your eyeballs. And also if your mouth is open and it looks like maybe you're singing, they dock your pay. And you have
singing.
Yeah. And you have to meet a certain quota that involves driving really dangerously. But if they catch you driving dangerously, then they dock your pay again.
Wow.
And like, that's a reverse Centaur. And I think when we think about this automation, it's really important to like ask yourself, like, is the human helping the robot or is the robot helping the person? Because that's really the difference between, nightmare and
I want my Amazon driver to feel free to sing at all times.
Indeed.
I don't see
Can you
anything
imagine
wrong with
if your
that.
boss came by when you were on your own working at home or in your car and said, Laporte, no singing. This isn't a choir practice.
Actually, Benito does that a lot, and the chat room constantly. They do not like when I sing. Hey, thank you for watching this little snippet from our big show, the News Roundtable, This Week in Tech. I'm Leo Laporte. Each week we cover the week's tech news, in-depth analysis, but it's also fun and engaging. You'll find it at twit.tv along with all of our shows. And if you want more, just hit the subscribe button, and we'll be sure to bring you a lot more great content. Thanks for listening.